This is Mark from laurelhollowpark.net, and today I want to look at some covered dishes by the Homer Laughlin China Company that were made in the early 1900s. We've got several different styles, and I want to go over their different shapes and different names. We'll jump right in with these terrines here in the end. This first one, this large round terrine with a notch lid, is the King Charles shape. And next to it is the colonial shape, and it's a large oval soup terrine. Now, even though this is called a soup terrine and this is called an oyster terrine, that doesn't mean you had to put soup in this one and oysters in this one. You could put whatever you wanted in any of them. This was just a way to differentiate between the two. They didn't call them round and oval. They called this one oyster and this one soup. And in front of it is a little oval version. This is actually the American Beauty shape, and this is a sauce terrine. And this would have come with an underplate and a small ladle. In fact, I'll show you the ladle for the larger ones. This is the colonial shape again. This is the soup terrine, and this is the ladle. Has a little ruffled design on the end. And there would have been a smaller version for the sauce terrine. And if you have one of these larger ladles, you can actually interchange it, because the same ladle was used for all the shapes that had these terrines. Starting with Golden Gate of the late 1800s. And when we look at these oyster terrines, virtually all of the old fancy embossed shapes of the early 1900s had these. You know, that includes Golden Gate, American Beauty, Colonial, Seneca, King Charles, Angelus, Hudson, Niagara, Genesee, Empress, and Republic. The soup terrines, on the other hand, not every shape had them. Colonial, of course, had them, as you can see here. American Beauty had it, and as King Charles had one, but Seneca did not. And all those shapes that follow King Charles, and that would start with Angelus and Hudson and go on through, they did not have soup terrines. The little sauce terrine, it's similar to the oyster terrine in that most of the older lines had them. Again, it would have had a little underplate and a smaller version of the larger ladle. Over here we have two covered dishes. A lot of people want to call these covered casseroles, but they're actually, the proper name is covered dish because they're oval. Now, a round piece is actually called a covered casserole. And I don't know if you can tell from the video, I'm going to move things around here for a minute, but this is actually, we actually have two sizes here. I don't know if you can tell. The one in the back is a little bit larger than the one in the front. These are both the Angelus shape. And this one in the back, if we go by trade sizes, and I might do a video on trade sizes sometime, this is called the 8-inch covered dish, and this is called the 7-inch covered dish. And most of these covered dishes, whether covered dishes or covered casseroles, sometimes the terrines, they will have a treatment number in them, and we might do a video on treatment numbers sometime. That is AX75. And this one with the Christmas holly and gold stamps and gold tracings is 9987. So there's not too many lines that have different sizes of covered dishes. Colonial has them, Hudson has them, Angelus of course has them. But sometimes that causes a little bit of confusion, especially if you find a base from one and a lid to the other. They're not going to fit, and that's simply because there's two different sizes. Now over here we have another covered dish. This is Republic, and it's wearing a carnation decal. The treatment number for this is SR25, and you will generally see this treatment on Hudson. Here it is on Republic with gold stamps. The SR standing for Sears and Roebuck, because it was an exclusive. So that's a covered dish because it's oval. And in front of it is a covered casserole, and it's round. You notice none of these, the covered dishes or covered casseroles, have any notches in them. This one, let's see. Does it have a number? Yeah. R8424. This is the Jean decal with gold stipple. And the last piece is a notch lid casserole, and this is the Hudson shape. And I've put a Hudson oyster terrine, again a large round notch lid piece. This is the oyster terrine. In front and back of it, I don't know if you can tell in the video on this, but the oyster terrine is larger than the notch lid casserole. It's a little bit taller, it has a greater capacity. The notch lid casserole is smaller. There's only a few Homer Laughlin shapes that have notch lid casseroles. Usually Hudson and Angelus is where you will see those. But we have all these different shapes and all these different names, and you might be wondering why there are so many different ones. Part of the reason has to do with European wares, because Homer Laughlin and other East Liverpool potteries of the late 1800s and early 1900s were copying French and British wares. They were copying decorations, they were copying shapes, they were copying back stamps in some cases, and in here we see them copying assortments, because the assortments could consist of 60, 70 or more items, and this included a whole host of covered dishes. So in the 1920s, early 1920s I'd say, you know, the American potteries start coming in on their own and they stop copying all these foreign wares. And when they do that, all these terrines and all these extra pieces start to disappear. And the Quaker shape was actually the first Homer Laughlin shape that didn't have any terrines. It did have a covered dish and it did have a covered casserole, just like you see here for Republic. Again, covered dish, covered casserole. The shape that followed Quaker was Yellowstone, and that would have been about 1925, 1926, and there's a Yellowstone covered casserole here. Yellowstone was the first shape to have simply a covered casserole. All these terrines and covered dishes and notch lid pieces disappeared. This particular example is called Buttercup, this treatment, and it is an early treatment on Yellowstone. And let's see, Y2. Let's see if it has a date code. Yep, D6L, that's 1926. And all the shapes that followed Yellowstone had simply casseroles. There's a couple shapes that didn't have a casserole, like Old Roman didn't have one. I don't think Ravenna had one. And all of them are going to be round. We don't have any ovals except in the case of Epicure. And let's see, Century, of course, is oblong, Jade is square, but the rest of them are going to have a more round shape. So that's it. Again, we'll go over these one more time. This is the covered oyster terrine, the covered soup terrine, the covered sauce dish, the covered dish, the covered casserole, and the notch lid casserole. So that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video.